Thank you for joining us on This is Exclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, on the show this evening, one of the most controversial subjects. In fact, Republic TV, since its launch in 2017, broke details of a scam called the Sandesara scam. And in the course of our reporting, what we also did was bring you details of the different layers, the different companies, the different banks, the different people who were defrauded in this particular case. It's a big group, the Sandesara group. In 2010, they were valued at 7 billion, which is roughly about 62,000 crore rupees. But as of this minute, all charges against them have been dropped after they were asked to pay a certain amount to settle. We'll tell you why it's on the show and it's controversial. We have top lawyers asking questions on whether this can now become a precedent. That and more coming up. Here are the headlines on This is Exclusive. History made in Ayodhya, the Dhwajarohan, a landmark culminating the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. A 500-year journey culminates in Ayodhya, the Dhwajarohan, the saffron flag, making sure that a new era now begins. Sandesara's cleared of all charges. Supreme Court has allowed them to make a one-time payment that ensures all charges are dropped. Top lawyers ask a question on whether the Supreme Court verdict will now become a precedent. People are looking at Vijay, Mallya, who by the way has also responded to the story. Nirav Modi, Mehul, Choksi are all looking closely at this particular Supreme Court order. We'll tell you why. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2018, agencies probing the Sandesara brothers said that they had taken loans and defrauded banks for over 8,000 crore. That was in 2018. In 2021, the attachments had begun, the investigation had begun, and there were many big names involved in this case called the Sandesara case, including politicians. In 2021, nearly 14,000 crore worth of attachments were done. But now, in 2025, all charges have been dropped against the Sandesara brothers. They've been asked to pay 5,100 crore as a one-time settlement. The Supreme Court order on Sandesara case saying that quashing would be operative on a deposit of 5,100 crore. 5,100 crore full and final payment based on the consensus by the petitioner and the banks involved. And that the amount of 5,100 crore should be deposited before the court. The amount, the court said, will be kept in a short-term interest-bearing fixed deposit account. And on submission on the claims, the court has said that the amount shall be dispersed to lender banks, thereby bringing an end to what has been almost 8 to 9 years of investigation in the Sandesara case. Now, there are questions being asked. Top lawyers are asking the question on whether this will now become a precedent for all the other economic fugitives. Now, these are the numbers given by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has spoken about the total amount of defalcation that stood at 5,383 crore. A one-time settlement was earlier made of 3,826. Foreign guarantors owed about 2,935 crore. Total sum that came up to about 6,761. A voluntary deposit was made after the courts intervened, which was roughly about 3,508 crore. And all the calculations, after all the calculations, investigating agencies have in a sealed cover said that a one-time payment of 5,100 crore will have to be made. Siddharth Luthra, senior advocate, spoke to Republic TV. I'd like to go across to that. Siddharth Luthra was live on Republic and he was of the opinion that this case could now become a precedent. Even though the Supreme Court in its judgment has said that this cannot be a precedent. This is what the court said. Directions are issued are in peculiar facts of this case. Therefore, Therefore, it cannot be a precedent, is what the court had said. They said that they shall not be treated as precedent. That's what the Supreme Court had said. Here's what Siddharth Luthra, top advocate, said while speaking to Republic TV earlier today.
It is given, acted on an OTS, a one-time settlement offered by the government authorities. The amount is quantified by the government authorities, and the government has come out with this proposal. The court put it to the government whether they had a proposal. The government and no such proposal can be made by the government or the financial institutions without the clearance of the RBI and possibly even the finance ministry. Right. That being the situation, the government is on board with this decision. Now the court is trying to is looking at the matter to see whether it can close all criminal cases, which it proposes to do. Just to give you a historical precedent, initially in the Bhopal gas tragedy case, something similar was done, later recalled. Thereafter in the 90s, such settlements were being accepted by the court and proceedings squashed by the Supreme Court. Somewhere in about 2009-10, the Supreme Court view got a little more conservative to say that in cases of public fraud or corruption, these settlements should not be accepted. Right. Having said that, in the last few years, there have been occasions where cases of financial fraud or cases of, let's say, death or injury have also been settled on a compensation by the Supreme Court exercising its constitutional extraordinary powers under Article 142 to close rare cases on a case-by-case basis. What the court normally does, as it appears is proposed in this case, to make the case specific to these peculiar facts and to say that it will not be read as a judgment of the court or be followed or allowed to be used by others. So that is the exception clause that the court has putting it in this place, exercising its extraordinary powers under Article 142. The High Courts can't do it. The trial courts can't do it. This power only vests in the Supreme Court.
Right. So now the fact that let's talk about what kind of influence it might have on the legislative or policy reforms around financial regulation or corporate accountability. So this verdict, of course.
I think it's a standalone case. Is it possible that others will try and use it? Obviously they will. Litigants always want to take benefit of other orders for other individuals, and lawyers will always try and be creative. But I believe that the restriction that the Supreme Court puts it will make it difficult to use in any other similar case. Having said that, I think this is not about financial policy. It's about a decision two litigating parties have taken. Sterling Biotech on the one hand, and the government and its authorities and its functionaries on the other hand. And the court is only fine-tuning it and putting its approval on it.
So any specific reason for being, considering this particular verdict? Because, given the fact that they have been now given that if they might be able to deposit rupees 5,100 crore, then of course all the criminal charges.
So what seems to be the idea is that if banks or financial institutions had to collect their money, it would take them years, if at all they could collect it. Okay. But here is a party which is willing to offer the money, and the banks and financial institutions have quantified the amount which they believe is due to them and are willing to accept it. So in such circumstances, it is the court's way of ironing out the gaps between the two parties and allowing them to settle the matter and consequently close the criminal proceedings.
Shravan is joining me live. Shravan tracked this case very extensively when it broke. I think it was 2017, Shravan, 2017 when it broke. 2018 investigation happened. They put a number to it. If I'm not wrong, roughly about 8,000 crore. They said the loan fraud was valued at 8,000 crore. 2021, cut to 2021, 3 years later, 14,000 crore of assets of Sandesara Group attached by Enforcement Directorate. Of course, Supreme Court order goes into great detail of how much was paid back and how much was due to be paid, and finally how much they will have to pay. What happens to the case, Shravan, and are there concerns that maybe this will be used by the others?
Well, Niranjan, let me just quickly, in a nutshell, tell our viewers what exactly is this case all about and why is there a change in the number that you've essentially spoken about? What is the alleged amount of a scam? Now, when the case was first registered by the Central Bureau of Investigation, it was in the year 2017. It was based on a complaint that was filed by the Andhra Bank. In fact, it was pegged at about 5,000 crore rupees. Now, as the investigation began, what we are given to understand, the Enforcement Directorate started looking into the transactions that have essentially taken place. And it was thereafter pegged about 10,000 crore rupees, following which multiple attachment took place, and it was outside India too. In fact, oil fields of Sterling Biotech was also seized or attached by the Enforcement Directorate. We are looking at about 306 such properties, movable properties that were basically frozen by the Enforcement Directorate. Now, as far as this case goes, what really happens? In the year 2022, it was the Honorable Supreme Court which had basically instructed the central agencies to stop or keep the investigation in abeyance because there was application that was filed by the promoter, and the promoters had essentially offered that they are willing to pay up the money. At least, the principal sum was something that they wanted to give. Over a period of time, we are given to understand that they had started repaying the banks. There are at least 4 banks that are under consideration, starting with the State Bank of India, Canara Bank, UCO Bank being some of them. Now, what sort of an impact does it really have? It has an impact as far as economic fugitive offenders are concerned, particularly in the case of Vijay Mallya, or for that matter Nirav Modi, as well as Mehul Choksi, because you've had Vijay Mallya essentially offering the banks a one-time settlement, or what is known as the OTS. That is exactly what has happened in this particular case. But it's important to highlight this kind of a clean chit, if I may say so, washes away this civil liability that the accused has. And what essentially happens thereafter is that the criminal liability is also taken away, which means that the investigative agencies do not have any further power to investigate this entire case. And the criminal conspiracy is also washed away. And the fact of the matter is that you have those who have been accused of serious crimes are basically let off by simply saying that a principal amount that they are willing to pay, they give it. And the fact of the matter is that in the course of this entire investigation, a large part of it which remains unseen, that is whether at all, some amount of money has been hidden somewhere, or they've basically used properties in some other places which still haven't been discovered or unearthed by the investigative agencies, that no longer will see the light of the day. And that is the reason why, Niranjan, this particular order that has been passed by the Supreme Court, while you've had legal luminaries saying that, look here, it is, both the parties came up with this solution. Yeah. You have had the government coming up with the solution along with the concerned party here. And that is the reason why in some cases it works out, and it is not going to be a precedent, is what some legal luminaries have to basically point out. But there is absolutely no doubt, and when I've spoken to multiple people within the central agencies, they've all indicated the fact that it takes away the power of investigation to begin with, and perhaps this is a route opening for those who have a similar case slapped against them.
Shava, and I'll end by saying just one point. This is what Vijay Mallya has been saying, that he's willing to pay back. Now, obviously the court has said this is not going to be a precedent. The Supreme Court has spoken about how the facts are different in this particular case. We don't know. But even top lawyers are saying, can it be a precedent? Interesting development. Thank you for joining us with those inputs. Shravan has investigated every aspect of that case, and one fine day, there is a settlement in court. Ladies and gentlemen, interesting story. We get a feeling it's going to develop in the next few days and weeks. Let's go on and get you the big headline. The big headline of the day, as Ayodhya witnessed a historic celebration today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was there. He hoisted a saffron flag atop the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, marking its formal completion. Now, this milestone comes 22 months after he presided over the consecration of the Ram Lalla idol. The flag, measuring 10 by 20 feet, features sun, Om symbol, and the Kovidara tree, symbolizing Lord Ram's brilliance and valor. Now, it's a historic moment. Essentially, what it means is that the 500-year Ram Janmabhoomi movement has now come a full circle. It's come to an end. And joining us on this special occasion, I have Amish Tripathi, author. Thank you, Amish, for joining us. Amish, everyone's eyes were on what was happening in Ayodhya. If you can tell our viewers, simplify it, what does today's Dhwajarohan symbolize at Ayodhya and for the Hindus of India?
I think at various levels. One is, of course, at the religious level. When the Dhwajarohan is done, it signifies that the temple, the entire temple complex, indeed, is complete. And this is, in a way, the end of a 500-year journey. When Babur, the Uzbek foreign invader, who destroyed our Ram Lalla's birthplace's temple, the Ram Janmabhoomi temple, and since then, indigenous Hindus and indeed actually others as well, Sikhs, Buddhists, were also involved in this struggle for centuries, and the temple has been rebuilt. This has rarely happened around the world. Many of the ancient idol worshipping, goddess worshipping, nature worshipping cultures were attacked. Their temples were destroyed, very much like what happened out here. The Greco-Roman culture, Pharaonic Egyptians, but it's rare that an ancient culture which has lost its worship place has managed to revive it. That is the religious significance of this, but there's a civilizational significance as well. As India rises, I think Ayodhya will be symbolic and almost like a totem pole for us to help us revive our understanding of Ram Rajya. And in that sense, the marks, the symbols on the flag itself are in some ways, I think, almost seminal for us. Because, of course, the Om symbol everyone knows, the sun symbol everyone knows, Lord Ram's dynasty, the Ikshvaku dynasty, they were Suryavanshis, the solar dynasty, sun dynasty. But the third symbol, the Kovidara Vriksh that's there, that is a symbol of the Ayodhya, the ancient Ayodhya kingdom. This has been mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana. I've read many of these versions, of course, as I'm sure you're aware. Valmiki ji is credited with 3 Ramayans, the Valmiki Ramayana, Ananda Ramayana, and the Adbodh Ramayana, and there are various other Ramayans as well. In the Valmiki Ramayana, the tree is described as a bark. If I remember correctly, when Lord Bharat was riding on his chariot into the jungle, this symbol was forgotten in the later versions of the Ramayana. It's still a mystery why that happened. Was the symbol forgotten for some reason? I don't know, right? Primary sources scholars need to analyze and research that. But what we have done with this is we've revived that symbol. And that to me shows the strength of the continuity that the Indian civilization has. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive, the only one. Every other pre-Bronze Age culture is dead. They are museum pieces. This flag is symbolic of that. We Indians, Mother India will never die. We Indians will not let her die.
Yes. Well, absolutely. And today I don't want to drag you into the politics of it, but because we have limited time, I'll ask you a question anyway. Why do you think there are some people making politically irrelevant comments? There is a political section questioning this moment. Do you feel somewhere some sections are sensing a threat with what has happened in Ayodhya?
This is a deeper question, needs a more nuanced, long answer, but let me attempt it in as short a way as I can. We've suffered really brutal invasions for 1,000 years. Will Durant had said the Turkic invasion, what we call the Delhi Sultans and the Timurid Mughals were Turks. The Turkic invasions were probably the bloodiest in human history. And immediately post that, the Europeans came in and tens of millions died in man-made famines during British rule. It was 1,000 years of really severe tests. Right? A civilization which suffers such huge challenges, such huge tragedies, tends to become defensive. It's natural, right? And many other civilizations, I would remind you, didn't survive. These same invaders who came here went to various other parts of the world. Zoroastrian Persia, for example, is dead. Greco-Roman, Pharaonic Egyptians, Aztecs, Incas, great cultures, they're all dead. We are still here. So we are bearing the scars of that 1,000 years of invasion. It has made us a little defensive, which is understandable. This reflected in some ways as well. Like, I don't know if you're aware of that Kala Pani tradition that was there. It was very strong till a generation or two ago, that you couldn't go abroad, you couldn't cross the seas, otherwise jaat bahishkar ho jata tha. That has, and that was actually not a part of our ancient traditions. Indians were seafaring people. We traded with the rest of the world, but this was a defensive reaction. This has come down. This thing that, Hindus do not convert. You have to be born a Hindu. I would argue against that. If that was true, then how did Southeast Asia become Hindu 1,000 years ago? If we did not convert other people, and even if we forgot it in the last 1,000 years, we should be confident and vigorous once again. And there's nothing wrong with going out and preaching our traditions. And we will, of course, not force it on anyone else, and we will adapt it to the to the rituals, to the dietary habits, to the habits of others as well, because we are an inclusive society. So we must be much more confident. I suspect that many of the statements that you're seeing is a result of that defensive mindset, which is understandable after 1,000 years of invasions. I would argue that we need to go back to the kind of India we were pre 1,000 common era,
Yes.
when we were confident, outgoing, vigorous,
Yeah.
influenced so much of the world. We must revive that, that spirit once again, and hopefully this Ram Janmabhoomi temple, the symbol of it, will drive that revival.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today, Amish, on this special day. That's it on this edition of This is Exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. That's all the time we had, but thank you for joining us on the show. Arnab is debating it at 8 p.m. Hindu pride, and why some are rattled about it. Let's talk about it. 8 p.m.
Co-powered by Century Ply Club Prime.